It was the sound that woke me. Not a crash, not a bang. It was a soft tap. 3 taps. On my window. At 2:47 a.m. I live alone in a small apartment on the 2nd floor of an old building. The kind of place where you get used to hearing the creaks of the wood and the hum of the pipes. But that night the sound was something else. It wasn't a gust of wind or a tree branch or even the usual sounds of the city. It was distinct, deliberate, and close. So close it made my heart drop straight into my stomach. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. A dream, maybe. I had been working long hours at the office lately, and my mind was probably playing tricks. I pulled the blanket over my head and shut my eyes, hoping to fall back asleep. Then it came again. I froze. The taps were so light, almost playful, like someone was testing if I was awake. I sat up slowly, my breath shallow. My window was covered by thick curtains, but I knew, just knew, something wasn't right. I had never, in all the time I'd lived there, heard that sound before. I had never had anyone knock like that. I got out of bed and crept over to the window, heart pounding in my chest. The streetlights outside barely filtered through the curtains, casting a faint glow across the room. I pulled the fabric back just enough to peek outside. There was nothing. No person. No shadow. Nothing but the empty street and the sound of my own breathing. I let out a nervous laugh, feeling foolish. Maybe it was just someone passing by or my mind playing tricks on me. I turned to walk back to my bed when I heard something else. A soft scrape. Like fingernails dragging across glass. I whipped around and looked out the window again, this time with more urgency. Nothing. Just the street. But then I noticed something, a small smear of what looked like dirt on the glass. A streak, thin and fresh. I stepped back, horrified, and the first thought that crossed my mind was, did someone climb up to my window? My legs felt weak, but I knew I had to check. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911 with trembling hands, and started heading for the door. That's when I heard the noise again. But this time it wasn't from the window. It was from inside the apartment. I turned slowly, eyes darting across the room, my stomach dropping. The apartment felt colder now. The shadows seemed deeper, and every corner of the room felt alive with an unseen presence. I froze, the phone still pressed against my ear as I listened. I could hear breathing. Slow, steady breathing. I turned toward the closet, dread creeping up my spine. I hadn't heard the door open, hadn't heard anything out of place, but I knew someone was there. I swallowed hard and stepped toward the closet. As I reached for the handle, the breathing grew louder. Then a voice, soft, barely audible, whispered from the darkness. "Don't worry, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to watch." My heart stopped. I swung open the door, my breath caught in my throat, but there was nothing. Just an empty closet. Just when I thought I was losing my mind, I felt it. A cold hand on my shoulder, gripping tightly. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't need to. I knew it was there. I could feel the presence, could feel the breath against my neck. I bolted for the door, my phone still on the line, but when I opened it, the hallway was empty. The elevator light flickered, casting a dim light across the floor. I ran down the stairs, never looking back. But I know it's still out there. It's always out there, tapping on my window at night, watching. And no matter how far I run, I can't shake the feeling. It's waiting for me to come home. I'm still not sure if I imagined it or if I was actually awake when it happened. But when I looked out my window at 3 a.m., I saw my own reflection standing in the yard. I know it was me, but it wasn't me. Let me explain. It started a few weeks ago when I moved into this small house on the edge of town. It was a quiet place, a little rundown but cheap. I was in a rush to get out of my old apartment, so I didn't ask too many questions. The landlord seemed nice enough, just an older woman who was a little odd, always moving around with a sense of urgency like she was hiding something. The first few days were fine, nothing out of the ordinary. Then, on the third night, I woke up to the sound of what I thought was someone knocking on my door. I stumbled out of bed, checked the peephole, and nothing. The porch light was off, the yard empty. I brushed it off as some random noise, maybe a branch or a cat, and went back to sleep. But it happened again the next night, and the next. At 3 a.m. without fail, I'd hear those same soft knocks. I started locking the deadbolt, double-checking the windows, but the knocking didn't stop. I told myself it was just the house settling, or maybe the wind messing with something on the porch, even though the knocks sounded deliberate. Then one night, the knocking was accompanied by a whisper. At least that's what I thought it was. I woke up to the sound of a voice, soft and faint, almost like it was coming from inside the walls. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear it moving around like it was looking for something. Or someone. I froze, holding my breath, trying not to move. I didn't want to give away that I was awake, that I was aware of whatever it was. After what felt like an eternity, the whispering stopped. I lay there, wide-eyed, heart pounding, listening to the silence. And then I saw it. The reflection. I looked out my bedroom window, expecting to see the empty yard like usual. But there, standing under the bare street lamp, was someone staring straight at me. I could see them clearly, the outline of their figure, even their face. But it was me. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a shadow or a hallucination. I knew my own face, my own features, my own movements. But the way they stood there, motionless, unmoving, it wasn't me. It was wrong. I rushed over to the window, pulling back the curtains, and the figure didn't move. I could feel my pulse racing as I stared at myself, standing still, staring back at me. The silence stretched on until, after a moment, the figure raised a hand, slowly, and pointed directly at me. I slammed the curtains shut and backed away from the window, my heart in my throat. The knocks came again. Soft, persistent, like a reminder that it was still there. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. And the next morning, I did what anyone would do. I called the landlord. She didn't answer, so I left a voicemail, asking if there had been any strange occurrences in the house before I moved in. I also mentioned that I thought I might be hearing things or maybe just overreacting, but that I was a little creeped out. She called me back that afternoon. Her voice was shaky, almost nervous. "I should have told you sooner," she said. "This house, it's been empty for years. The last tenant, well, they didn't make it. Not exactly. He got too close to something and he became part of the house in a way. It's not just the house that's haunted, you see. It's the people who stay too long." I wanted to hang up, but I couldn't speak. She went on, almost like she was warning me, her voice low and strained. "You're not the first to see it. It's always someone who looks just like you. If you're lucky, it just watches. If you're not, well, don't stay too long." I didn't stay. I couldn't. I packed up everything and left that same night. But every time I look in a mirror, I swear I see something, someone, just over my shoulder. I don't know if it's the house or something worse, but I'm starting to wonder if it followed me. And the worst part is, I'm afraid that one night I'll wake up and it will be standing next to my bed, smiling.
I'll never forget the sound of the knock at my door, right before my phone rang. It was almost midnight when it happened. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through Reddit on my phone, when I heard a loud, deliberate knock on my front door. My heart dropped. Who could it be at this hour? No one I knew would knock this late. I hesitated, then got up to check through the peephole. No one. Confused, I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of it. Was I hearing things? Maybe it was a neighbor? But I lived in a small building and the walls were thin. I would have heard someone in the hallway. So I decided to stay quiet and wait. But just as I turned back toward my couch, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I froze. My instinct told me to ignore it, but something pulled me to answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice shaky. There was a pause, then a faint, breathy voice whispered, "I see you." My blood ran cold. It wasn't a prank call. It wasn't a friend messing around. The voice was too real, too intimate. I slammed my phone down, terrified. The knocking at the door started again, this time louder, as if whoever it was knew I was inside. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I grabbed my phone again, this time dialing 911. As it rang, the voice whispered again, "You're not alone." The 911 operator picked up and I explained everything. I told them about the knocking, the phone call, the voice that seemed to know exactly what I was doing. I begged them to send someone. But before they could respond, there was a loud crash from the kitchen. I dropped the phone and ran, not caring if I was heard. I rounded the corner into the kitchen and my breath caught in my throat. The back door, my locked back door, was wide open. I don't know how it happened. I never heard it open. I bolted back into the living room, locked every window, every door. I turned off the lights and hid in the corner of the room, too afraid to move. The calls didn't stop. Every few minutes, my phone would ring with that same unknown number. I ignored everyone. Then around 2 a.m. I heard it. The knock again. But this time it wasn't just a knock. It was a series of rapid, violent slams against the door. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran into the bathroom, locked myself in, and sat there shaking, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The knock stopped. It felt like hours passed, but I didn't dare check the time. Eventually, I heard the sound of a car speeding away. I finally mustered the courage to check the door. Nothing was there. I thought I was safe. I thought it was over. But when I picked up my phone, there was a new voicemail. It was the voice again. "You should have answered sooner." I never found out who it was. I moved out of that apartment the next week. But every so often I'll hear a knock at the door and I'll remember the voice. The one that knew exactly where I was. And now I never answer my phone.